I remember one time specifically when I think I was like 6 or something, she was doing my hair, and I'll just say what she said. She said, "I really wish I would have never had you and your brother because it was just the two of us at that time.
Wow.
Because I feel trapped." And of course, she's my mom and she loves me and she loves her children. But I think had she been given the choice, she would have picked a different life. And she didn't have the choice. And I'm the first woman in my lineage who has options and has choices. And I decided to have my child. I decided to get married because I wanted to. It wasn't something that just happened to me. And I think that for my grandmother and for my mother, their lives just sort of happened to them.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Cycle Starters podcast. I'm Heather Rebecca Wilson, and today I'm so excited to be joined by Clarissa Guillen, an alchemical priestess, ancestral curandera, an initiated Myrrophore who helps women remember who they are. Clarissa's work weaves Afro-Caribbean folk magic, ancestral hands-on healing, shadow work, emotional alchemy, and the sacred feminine arts. At the heart of it is an invitation to come back to your power, your truth, and the parts of you that have always known the way. In this conversation, we'll explore Clarissa's ancestral healing journey, the cycles she's here to begin and break in her lineage, and what it looks like to reclaim divinity and self-trust through embodied practice. If you're listening and you're in a season of shedding old stories and choosing yourself in a new way, I think this episode will meet you right where you are. So before we dive into our conversation, I do have a favor to ask. If you are enjoying the content that we are creating here on the Cycle Starters podcast, please like, subscribe, comment, and share. It really helps the algorithm get our content in front of more viewers. Also, if you are interested in receiving your own galactic astrology reading from me, go to heatherrebeccawilson.com/readings and you'll see all the options there. In addition, I do have a community on Substack called The Cycle Architect. So if you would like to be in circle with us, if you'd like to receive my newsletter, go to Substack and I will put that link in the show notes as well. So without any further ado, let's welcome Clarissa to the show. Thank you for being here, sis. How are you?
I'm amazing. Thank you for having me.
Oh my God, you are so welcome. And yes, thank you for being here. Well, let's just jump in. Let's hear about your blood ancestors. What can you share with us?
Yeah, so I was born in the US, but both my parents are from the Dominican Republic, which means that I've never done my ancestry, but we probably have some Taino, African, and Spanish European blood. My brother did his ancestry, and that's what his came up as. So I'm assuming it's going to be the same for me.
Nice. Okay, cool. Well, so I have a two-part question for you now, because this was kind of what my experience was when I started cultivating a relationship with my ancestors on the other side. So when did you realize that patterns could be passed down from generation to generation? And then secondly, when did you get in your power around starting new cycles and not being a victim to what you had inherited? So yeah, basically it's like, how did the concept of ancestral healing enter your consciousness?
Yeah, I think that for me, it was probably in my early to mid 20s. And it was because I was having a lot of issues with my mother and the mother wound and just trying to figure out why it felt like she hated me and was jealous of me and always competing with me. But then also at the same time, wanted to be loving and have a great relationship with me. And it was when I started going to therapy around that I started to think about what it must have been like for her to have been raised by my grandmother, who had 7 other kids, who she was raising in poverty in the Dominican Republic. She would have to sell furniture in order to be able to feed my aunts and uncles. That I started to realize that a lot of my mother's patterns made sense based off of how she grew up, and that it wasn't that she wanted to be that way, didn't excuse it, but if she didn't have the tools and the resources to be any other way. She was the mother that she could be for me. And then that had me start realizing that, like, man, the way that you grow up and the resources that your parents have or don't have really impact how things play out for you and how they're able to relate to themselves, relate to life, and relate to you.
Thank you for bringing that piece in. I think that's so important. And I think for me, at first, when I realized, my gosh, this is a pattern in my family, at first I was like, why didn't anybody do anything about this? Why are they like this? They should have known better. But to go back to what you're saying, they didn't know better. They didn't have the resources at the time. They didn't have the knowledge, and they're just repeating what they've experienced, right? What was modeled for them. And so I think that that's a really important step along the journey, is just realizing that everybody did the best that they could, but it doesn't excuse the toxic behavior, any abuse at all. So yeah, there are nuances, right, to all of this. So thank you for bringing that into the conversation.
Of course, yeah. So I think that's where it all started for me. And then it wasn't until recently, actually within the past maybe 3 years, that I really started to do a lot of work of reclaiming my ancestry and reclaiming my lineage as a Dominican woman. Because when I was in my early 20s, late teens, 18, 19, going into college, my whole thought process was that I had to be as white as possible in order to succeed. So I actually really detached a lot of myself from my upbringing and from my culture. I mean, Spanish was my first language. I went to schools in a neighborhood where the minorities were white people, where it was mainly people of the global majority. In my high school, almost everybody spoke Spanish. And so when I got to college, it was a real culture shock for me, but also I felt a lot of pressure to assimilate, because the only people that I had seen that were really successful and had made it out of the hood and owned a single family home and had all these things were white people. And so I adopted white culture and started to speak Spanish a lot less with my friends, with my partner. And I really just wanted to be a white girl, which is, it sounds crazy to say because I will never be white, but that's really what I was desiring, because I was trying to get to success, and success in my mind meant white.
Girl, thank you for sharing that. And I can so relate, being a person who is racially ambiguous and having grown up in a very white privileged suburb of Washington, D.C. I too wanted to be white. And I also got that from my mom, who is Filipino. She was born during the war in the Philippines. And so she is in her mid 80s now. And while she's gotten better, and I think it's part of my influence on her, she was steeped in colonial mentality, where they were taught, after being colonized by the Spanish for 400 years and then colonized by the Americans for 100 years, she was taught that white was right, and that anything American was better than anything Filipino, and then anything indigenous was primitive or even of the devil. So part of my journey, I think similar to you, has been dissolving this internalized oppression and dissolving the colorism that we've also inherited. And I got that on both sides, because my dad, like I told you, is this light-skinned Black guy who had a mother who could pass, who didn't like white people, but also didn't like very dark-skinned Black people. I mean, it was crazy. And then both grandmothers told me, stay out of the sun. My Filipino grandmother said, stay out of the sun. You're going to look like you work in the fields. And then my grandmother on my paternal side was just like, you can't get dark, So what can you share with me about your experience with colorism?
Oh, yeah, it is prevalent in the Dominican Republic and within Dominican culture. My grandmother is very light skinned with straight hair. She looks Spanish, like from Spain. We learned Turkish. Her mother was actually from Turkey, and her dad was Spanish. I know. And then, but my grandfather was darker skin, and my dad is black. But it was really interesting growing up, because whenever my grandmother would get mad at me or get mad at my dad, because she lived with us our whole lives, and this is my mother's mother, she would call me Little Haitian, Haitianita, as like a loving insult, because to be Haitian was associated with being dark skinned and also not as elevated as, say, like a Dominican. And I also grew up with the same thing, like, they would say, muchachita, no coja mucho sol, don't take a lot of sun, because they didn't want me to get very dark. So yeah, I'm sure it comes from the Spanish colonizers.
Thank you for sharing all of that. And yeah, it's cool to be in dialogue with somebody who's had experience with this in their own house and in their own families. Some people wouldn't believe that this stuff happens, but It's so in the DNA, right? It's in our blood. All of this just colonial trauma, racialized trauma, racial identity development trauma. Well, so if you had to put a fine point on it, what are the patterns that you feel like you are breaking in this lifetime?
Specifically in motherhood, it is actually getting to be the mother that I want to be. I think that my grandmother was robbed of that. She had a child who she had to give up because she couldn't afford to keep her, but then she raised 7 other children. And I'm sure that when she had my mother, she wasn't really with my grandfather in that way because he left her for another woman for a visa, a passport, which is also crazy, while she was pregnant with my mother. I don't think she wanted to be pregnant. Of course, she was going to keep the baby, but that was hard for her. And then she didn't have the resources in order to raise them in the way that they needed to be raised. They were basically raising each other while she was working to try to put food on the table in the Dominican Republic, which is not technically a third world country, but it might as well be because people don't have access to resources the way that they do here in the US. And I think my mother was neglected because of that, not because my grandmother didn't love her, but she just didn't have the capacity to give to these children. And my mother was gay. She was gay, but she married my dad and she had 3 children. And when she was in her late 30s, early 40s, she came out and married a woman. And I remember one time specifically when I was like 6 or something, she was doing my hair and I'll just say what she said. She said, "I really wish I would have never had you and your brother." Because it was just the 2 of us at that time.
Wow.
Because I feel trapped. And of course, she's my mom and she loves me and she loves her children. But I think had she been given the choice, she would have picked a different life. And she didn't have the choice. And I'm the first woman in my lineage who has options and has choices. I decided to have my child. I decided to get married because I wanted to. It wasn't something that just happened to me. And I think that for my grandmother and for my mother, their lives just sort of happened to them.
Oh my goodness. Well, so what's your relationship with your mother like now? I'm so curious.
You know, it's touch and go. Most of the time, we're fine. I've done so much work around her and just accepting her as she is and just understanding that her growth is going to depend on her and that is independent of me. I didn't do anything as a child or as her daughter to make her be the way that she is. She just doesn't have the tools. She doesn't have the resources. And, you know, she's apologized for a lot of the things that she's done. And she recognizes that a lot of the way that she treated me was very reactive. And she didn't want to be that way, but she didn't know how else to handle her emotions and handle her ways of being. She's still very competitive, which I have a daughter myself. And so it's something that having a daughter, I don't understand how a mother can compete with their daughter, but her being the last of 7 children, not getting the attention that she wanted, I can see how that would bubble up in her. And then I can also see how when that emotion is present and you don't know what to do with it, it's going to come out in really weird ways. And it has come out in really weird ways. But I love her and I accept her the way that she is. You know, I go over to her house. I have boundaries up with her that I have to have in order to protect my heart, in order to protect the relationship it is that we do have. But I understand her in a way that I didn't when I was younger.
Oh my gosh. It is so clear to me that you have done so much work around this because you're able to share this story from a really neutral place energetically. So thank you for modeling that because I mean, I have people in my own life who are still struggling with their mother wound. And it can be the most debilitating thing, I think, if you remain in a place of victimhood around it, it really just slows you down. It's really a huge obstacle. I want to dig into that a little bit more. I guess maybe it was you having your own daughter, right? Your own child that forced you to confront your issues with your mom. But I mean, talk to me about that. How did you get to this place of neutrality, right? Around it, where you're kind of detached?
Yeah, a lot of therapy. I did a lot of trauma therapy, EMDR therapy, specifically around her and the relationship I had because she was very verbally abusive and also physically abusive. So I had to do a lot of work around that because as a child, I made it mean that there was something wrong with me because you think to yourself that your mother's supposed to love you and supposed to take care of you and supposed to be nurturing towards you. And it felt like she was my enemy. It felt like she wanted me to have a downfall. But then at the same time, she loved me. It was very confusing. And then also when I got into sacred feminine work, which happened right before I had my daughter, I stumbled upon the divine feminine kind of world. And I started doing a lot of womb healing, preparing myself to have my child. And of course, when I became pregnant with her, a lot of things came up because when I told my mother that I was pregnant with my daughter, she didn't say anything. She just started talking about other random things. And her wife at the time was like, when someone says that to you, you congratulate them or you celebrate. You don't just then talk about yourself. And I made it very clear to her that, I didn't want her to be part of the birth and the delivery, that I just wanted it to be just really me and my partner. But in that time frame of me being pregnant, of going through the process of consciously conceiving my daughter, I had to confront a lot about what I thought motherhood was about. I immediately burst out crying when I found out that I was pregnant, and not because I was happy, but because I just assumed that I was going to fuck it up in some way. I'm like, I'm either going to lose her while she's in utero, or she's going to come and I'm not going to be able to give her love, because I never experienced the kind of motherly love that I imagine that other people get to experience. If I never had it, how can I give it to her? But then when she was here and she was born, my whole body was just like, oh no, I know how to do this. I know how to be a mother. How can you not love this perfect human who there's nothing that she could do that would make me not love her? And there's also nothing that she can do that would make me love her. I simply just love her. I just love her as a being and love her as a human. And I think through the process of me coming into motherhood and understanding this is what it was supposed to be like, and then also having all this knowledge of trauma and what separates someone from themselves and what makes them behave in a certain way, it allowed me to understand that my mother did love me, but if she didn't receive the love that she needed, because my grandmother was overextended in so many ways, she also didn't know how to give that to me. And she did the best that she could. And, for her, it was like she has food in the fridge, a roof over her head, like everything that I wanted, I got physically. But the one thing that I wanted the most is to have this deep, loving relationship with my mother. And I never got that because she never had it. She didn't know how to give it because she never had it. But that didn't mean that it wasn't in her. I think all of the things that she went through, it just blocked her ability to be able to admit it, I guess is like the appropriate word. And so because I understood that, and then I had this very visceral experience because I am a mother now, right? It just makes sense to me. I don't know how else to put it, but like I just deeply understand it. And removing myself from her behavior, I wasn't the cause of it, is what really allowed me to be able to, I guess, come to terms and accept her and what she did as like it just was what it was. I don't need to attach the story that like it was because I was a bad baby or a bad daughter or whatever.
Oh my goodness, so much wisdom you are sharing with our community right now. Thank you for talking so vulnerably, and openly about all of this. Well, so you have to tell me, what is a Myrrophore?
It's a scent priestess. Yeah. So a Myrrophore translates to a myrrh bearer, which is somebody who carries the myrrh essential oil. So that's the term that they give to women who were like Mary Magdalene, who knew how to use essential oils to anoint the body. So a Myrrophore is a scent priestess.
Amazing. Thank you. When I was reading your bio, I was like, what is this? I am so intrigued. Well, you just mentioned Mary Magdalene, and I think that was kind of like my portal into your work. Tell me about how you got to this place that you're at right now as this amazing priestess. And talk to me also about your relationship with the Mary Magdalene energy.
Yeah. So I think as most women who come into sacred feminine work, I had a dark night of the soul about a year and some months after becoming a mother, where I just noticed some patterns that I didn't really like. And I had a moment where I was driving over a bridge and I was like, I could just drive off right now. Like I could just go, phew, and my daughter would probably be better without me. My husband would probably be better without me. They would have the ability to be with someone who they actually need. Because at the time, I felt like I didn't fit the motherhood mold nor the wifehood mold that I imagined that my daughter and my husband had, which when I finally had conversations with my husband and interacting with my daughter, I am exactly who they need. It's just, I had this whole story in my mind, but at that time, I didn't feel like I fit. And so when that thought crossed my mind, I knew it wasn't mine because immediately what popped into my mind was, well, I don't want to die. So like, that's not an option. But I don't want to live like this anymore. I don't want to do motherhood like this anymore. I don't want to live my life like this anymore. I don't want to be a wife like this anymore. So something's got to change. And I didn't know what, but something has to change. And I'm scrolling on Instagram. I had been following this girl for a really long time. And she had announced that she was doing a Mary Magdalene Sex Priestess 9-month initiation thing. And I don't know what possessed me, but I was just like, I don't need therapy. I need this. So I was like, I don't know what this is and why I'm so attracted to it, but I know this is going to fix me. So I ended up signing up for her container, which was at the time, it was supposed to be a group of other women. And I think for some reason the launch fell through, but she was like, if you still want to go through it, I will take you through it one-on-one. And I was like, yeah, sign me up, because her one-on-one was 10 times what I was going to pay for the group. I was like, if I'm going to get a one-on-one experience, I really want to do this. I need this. And through that process, I was learning more about Mary Magdalene and what is called the Rose lineage, which is the lineage that dates back to Isis and Inanna. And it is the life, death, and rebirth mystery school, essentially. It is a school that teaches us to go down and into the human experience and into the human body and feel all of our emotions and all of our expressions and all of our different archetypes as women, as humans, and also the counterpart of that, which is our divinity, which if you grew up Catholic or if you grew up in any sort of Christian religion, you don't get to see the feminine aspect of Christ or the feminine aspect of God as much. They've stripped her out. And she came for me, and she came for me through this sex priestess initiation, which people hear that term and they probably assume that I was having orgasms and doing all these sexual things, but actually it was a very spiritual and sensual process. And by sensual, what I mean is that it activated and called out of me all of my senses and to experience this life through my entire body. And I started to come back alive after that, because I was dead to myself. I had really lost myself in trying to be all these different versions of mother and wife that I thought I needed to be, thanks to the patriarchy. We have to thank them for so many things that are not helpful for us. And I ended up at a in-person sacred feminine ceremony with a woman named Sarah Jenks. And that's where I just deepened into this work. She had been trained through a specific school that had a Myrrophore training. And again, I was like, I don't know, this is going to fix me. So I went down that path, spent a whole year really deepening with these oils that go along with your chakras, was having so many out-of-body experiences. What I'm assuming are things that people would feel if they were on mushrooms or ayahuasca, but I was just having it with these essential oils and meditation and ceremony. And I found myself, I came back home to myself, and I don't know how I went through life without the goddess present. I never was obsessed with the stigmata. I don't know if anybody knows what that is. It's when the wounds of Jesus apparate or appear on a person's body. So when I was going through my confirmation at 15, I would pray to Mother Mary, and I would do the rosary every night, because I heard that if you did that, you would get these mystical powers. And I desperately wanted to experience the stigmata, but I never felt connected to the male god. I felt connected to Mary and the rosary and all that kind of stuff, and like that lineage of women. I loved all of the saints that were women and their stories and how they got to experience the end of the world, and they would have all these visions and stuff. And that aspect of it I adored, but I never really felt connected to God. It was like, it was this thing that was out there, where when I got into the sacred feminine path and I started learning about the different goddesses and sacred feminine archetypes, I felt it in my whole body. It just was like, I am this and this is me. And where has this been my whole life? And who was keeping it a secret and why? Why didn't I get to experience this? And my life has just not been the same since I have started to develop a relationship with the feminine aspect of God.
Sis, this is amazing. I am loving this. And also, I'm going to Egypt on a spiritual retreat. I'm a guest teacher in November, and I think you need to come. Have you been to Egypt before?
I've never been, but I'm dying to.
So we're going to talk offline about that. That's like the only thing that was flashing in my head as you're telling me this. This is so awesome. And this is making me want to transition our conversation into astrology, because I feel so strongly that you have done this in a past life, whether it was on Earth or off planet. You've done this before. It's just so clear to me just in what you're saying. So are you ready to talk some astrology now?
Well, let's talk astrology. I'm excited. I've never heard of this type of astrology, so I'm really intrigued.
Yes. Well, good. So I am a quantum soul guidance galactic astrology practitioner. So I have been using astrology in my professional practice to support people on their ancestral healing journeys since about 2020. But last year, I got the call to expand my notion of ancestors beyond blood ancestors and start to include star ancestors, because I do feel collectively we are in a moment of illumination and revelation around the real history of this planet and human history. And so, yeah, it was just a very, very powerful call last year. And so what galactic astrology allows me to do is that it adds an outer layer of fixed stars, nebulas, super cosmic points to the traditional tropical Western natal chart to illuminate your soul's journey over eons of time. So we're looking at past lives on Earth, but also past lives that are off planet. And astrology is not the rule for me, but it is a tool. For me, it's been an incredible language and framework for not only understanding myself as a spiritual being on an ancestral healing journey, but also for empowering myself. So that's just kind of the way I relate to it. So I want to start though with a conversation about your sun, moon, and rising signs, because they do make up the vast majority of your energetic signature. So you are a Virgo sun, correct? You are a Scorpio rising and a Pisces moon. I love this. So you've got earth, you've got water, and you've got more water in your big three. Let's talk about the Virgo sun, because the sun is where you shine. It's where the sun was the day that you were born. And this is the special sauce that you mix into everything that you do that makes you stand out from the other 11 astrological signs. And each sign is a spectrum of psycho-spiritual energy with a high expression and a low expression. So the high expression of Virgo, I think, is healing, right? We want to make things better. I'm a Virgo moon, so I know this energy really well. We are very detail oriented. And I associate that virgin archetype with not the woman who abstains from sex, but the woman who is complete unto herself without a man. So it's like the sovereign energy. That's the high expression of Virgo. And then the low expression of Virgo, unhealed Virgo, is anxiety. It's overthinking. It's being so critical of yourself that you are so fucking mean to yourself. And then, of course, that radiates out to other people. And also it's like missing the big picture. You're so focused in on the little details of something that you miss what's big and beautiful and right in front of your face. So talk to me about this Virgo sun life. What's your relationship with perfectionism? Because I think that's one of the main themes of the Virgo journey.
Yeah. So I would have said that I am not a perfectionist. I would have said that before because I'm definitely more type B. However, I don't like the idea of people thinking that I'm type B. So that is where the perfectionism comes in, which I've done a lot of work on. You know, people can think whatever it is that they want, but that's how it would be expressed in me. I can be very organized, but also very messy at the same time, but I don't want people to know that I'm messy. Does this make sense? It's kind of like Virgos will criticize other people to avoid criticizing themselves because they're doing that all day long. And so they hide all that self-criticism. It's kind of like that. So I think that's where it shows up for me in terms of like the shadow aspects of it. And then the light aspects of it is that I do consider myself very sovereign. When I think of sovereign, I think of the priestess. I just think of a woman who is just so badass and just believes in herself. And it's like the whole world could be crumbling. And she's like, I got me and I got this and we're going to be okay because I trust me.
I totally get that sovereign priestess energy from you. Like, duh, right? Okay. Well, so your rising sign is a totally different energy. So your Virgo sun is mutable earth. Earth is what we use to build the structures that give us stability and security in our lives. And then your Scorpio rising is fixed water. Water is your emotions, your feelings, and your sentiments. And fixed water is deep, right? So your rising sign is really important. That's why I always ask for your birth time, because my sense is when we are on the other side as a soul, right? We don't have this personality. we are deciding I'm going to come in at this time because I'm going to be an XYZ rising so that I can learn these lessons for my soul's growth and evolution. And so your rising sign is the vehicle for your divine mission. It's the energy that people first pick up on when they meet you, and it's your perception of reality. So you're perceiving everything through the scorpionic lens. And I think Scorpio in its highest expression is deep emotional sensitivity balanced with logic. You're not overwhelmed by your emotions because you feel very, very deeply. You're super psychic. I think all of the water signs are very psychic, and you're this Pisces moon, which we'll talk about later. I also think that Scorpio is the attentive detective. They want to get to the bottom of things. They want truth. And if they smell something nasty in the kitchen, they'll put on the hazmat suit and rip up the floorboards and go in with the flashlight to figure out what it is, right? They're not afraid of what's nasty and disgusting. They just want to get to the bottom of it. And this is why I love having all these Scorpio friends, because we can really go there with the dark humor. Nothing is off the table. Nothing is so taboo, right? We have so much fun. But I think unhealed Scorpio will stay in that darkness. Unhealed Scorpio is this all-consuming fear. I think that power dynamics are a big Scorpio theme, where unhealed Scorpio will want to dominate other people, like power over, where I think healed Scorpio is very much about shared power, power with. And I also think there's some vengefulness, right? And some secret keeping with unhealed Scorpio. I think of the scorpion with the tail and the stinger ready to sting because they're protecting their mushy gushy inside. Right? So talk to me about this Scorpio rising life, because I know that it is a life of intensity.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So I experience it as a mirror for people, which is very uncomfortable for the people who are in my life, which then before, when I didn't understand this energy, would be very uncomfortable for me. Because I would confuse their being confronted with truth as me having done something wrong or being too much or like a bitch. I thought that I was the problem. And most people who meet me, they say, I thought you were going to be such a bitch when I first met you, but you're actually so sweet. And, or people will fall in love because I feel like Scorpio energy is very attractive and alluring. I feel like people, they just like want to be in our energy. And then
sexy.
They get in and they're like, what do you mean I have to grow? What do you mean I have to do work? What do you mean there's things that I need to do to be in this energy? And so it's either people fall in love, and when they fall in love, they fall deeply in love with me and they're loyal and all that, those types of things. And I'm talking about all types of relationships, not just romantic, specifically with women. And, or I become the villain in their story. And so my work has been understanding what is mine and what is theirs. Because when I confuse that, I begin to change myself, and then my Virgo kicks in and I get very critical of who I am and what it is that I'm doing. And then I spin out in there's something wrong with me and I have to fix it and I can't believe it and why is it? But when I understand that, my energy is just confronting in that way. And that's not my job to make them comfortable. It is my job to learn how to communicate in a way that isn't so in your face, because sometimes just my Virgo and Scorpio together, when you're not afraid to just say the thing and go there, it can be intense and a little harsh sometimes, if I'm being quite honest. So I have to be careful in how I deliver things. But man, I feel my emotions deeply and I have no shame around it. And I'm dramatic with it. If I'm feeling low, I'm going to create a whole scene for myself. I go into my emotions and I ride the wave. My husband hates this about me because he gets very concerned. And I'm like, I'm fine. I know I'm talking about all these dark things, but I promise you, I'm totally fine. This is how I get through it.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. It's so much intensity. I also think a big theme for Scorpio is transformation. So because you're the Scorpio rising, dying and being reborn, that's just a regular thing for you. You've died and come back to life many, many, many times, right? And the other cool thing about Scorpio is that they're not afraid to go deep. And I think people with a strong Scorpio presence, or they're a Scorpio sun, moon, or rising, they can get frustrated with people who aren't as willing to go deep. You just want to say the truth. And as somebody with the Aries Mercury, I know what it's like to deliver things in a harsh way, right? It's like, ooh, that tongue is sharp, right? You can cut somebody with your words. So, I mean, I just love astrology, and each sign, like I said, has a high expression and a low expression. And, you know, each sign has just so many beautiful things about it. But unhealed Scorpio is fucking scary.
Yeah, vengeful, very, very petty.
Yes. Like, oh no, like get away.
Yeah.
I can't. All right. So let's talk about the moon, because this is actually really important for ancestral healing. So not only does the moon represent your emotions, your emotional core, it also represents ancestral wounds and the gifts that your ancestors have given you. The other cool thing about knowing your moon placement is that it gives you instructions on what you need to give yourself in order to feel balanced and at home in your own energy. And Pisces is also a water sign like Scorpio, but it's a different modality. It's mutable water. And when I tune into this energy of mutable water, it's like water without a container. It's water that seeps into everything it touches. And so I think part of the growth journey for Pisces is, how do I create loving boundaries, right? How do I create a container for all of this water? Because like Scorpio, you feel very deeply, you feel everything. I think Pisces is arguably the closest to the veil of all of the signs, of all of the water signs. There's this energy, at least in the high expression, of just like love for everything, for the animals, for people, for the earth, just so much compassion. It's a sign of spirituality and romance and artistry and dreaming. And then unhealed is a victim, blaming everybody else. They're like, oh, I can't be a leader. There's just a power thing going on. And also there's escapism. There's an escapism piece to it, right? Well, I'm going to binge watch this show instead of dealing with what's really going on.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me about how you care for your emotional life with this Pisces moon, because I think it's also a very intense placement.
It is, for sure. Again, feel things very, very deeply, and I can easily fall into victimhood very easily if I'm not careful. And I think there have been many times in my life where I have fallen into that. And I think whoever created me knew what they were doing. Because I think that had I not had Virgo as my sun, I would have a very different life than what I have right now.
Yeah,
Because
it balances
keeps
you.
it keeps me grounded and logical, because sometimes I can get very doom and gloom is the way that I will put it. It's actually been very interesting. My daughter is a Pisces sun. Watching her navigate the world, and her emotions exhaust me. Holding them exhausts me. And, and I'm like, but why? If I'm a Pisces moon, I should be able to hold this. And I do. But at the end of it, I'm just like, oh my gosh, I thought I felt deeply. Girl, you have got me beat when it comes to the drama and the emotions. But, it's interesting too, because I feel like I was a late bloomer when it came to spirituality. From what I understand, it's because I have a Pisces North node and a Virgo South node. So my life trajectory is heading towards being more mystical and woo, where I was very, very much I came from the world of academia. You can't get any more Virgo than that.
Right.
And so it's been interesting. I do think that the escapism is a real thing that I can fall into. And for me, the way that it shows up is I get very daydreamy and too optimistic, too in the dream and oh, but what if, but what if, but what if? And that's good, have optimism, but also we got to look at numbers and we got to look at the reality of things to be able to also make decisions that help us to be in alignment with our life.
So much wisdom there. Well, so are you ready for your mini galactic reading, my friend?
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay. All right. So I love looking at the galactic signatures in someone's chart, because it often reveals the deeper soul themes behind what they're here to contribute to the world. And so when I looked at your chart, it became very clear why you carry the markers of the teacher, speaker, guide, influencer, galactic life theme. So whenever I look at a chart, I scan for these life themes first. And not everybody has markers for any of these, but you had the teacher speaker influencer guide theme come up. And just to give you an example of somebody who has this same signature, Tony Robbins has this signature. Okay.
Oh, interesting.
Maya Angelou, yes, they have this signature.
Well, okay.
Yeah, I know, girl. So one of the strongest signatures is your Saturn and Uranus conjunct the galactic center in Sagittarius in the second house. And the galactic center is often described as a cosmic transmission point. It's a place where higher wisdom, expanded consciousness, and universal truth flow into our lived experience. So people with a strong galactic center connection often feel called to share perspectives that help others see life from a much bigger vantage point. And it's really fascinating that you have both Saturn and Uranus there, because Saturn represents mastery, wisdom, responsibility, and earned authority. And then Uranus represents awakening and innovation and disruption and liberation. And so together, I think they create this very beautiful balance between ancient wisdom and future vision. You are not here simply to repeat what has already been taught. You're here to take these timeless truths and express them in ways that help people navigate the world that we are living in right now. And there is a natural bridge builder quality in your chart, this capacity to honor tradition while also helping people evolve beyond outdated limitations. And because this is happening in your second house, it suggests that one of your soul lessons has been learning to fully value your voice, your own wisdom, and the unique perspective that you do bring. And your teachings become more powerful the more deeply you trust your own lived experience. Another beautiful placement that jumped out at me is that your descendant is conjunct the star Andromeda Tidwin in the sign of Taurus. And the descendant, or the DC, represents relationships and partnerships and how we meet other people. And the Andromeda frequencies are often associated with freedom and liberation and helping others transcend limitations. And so this tells me that one of your gifts is helping people feel freer simply through being in relationship with you. You naturally encourage others to expand beyond the boxes that they've been placed in, whether through your work, your friendships, your partnerships, or your teachings. You help people remember possibilities that they had forgotten were available to them. And there's a very gentle but powerful liberating force in your energy. And then we come to perhaps one of the most transformative placements in your chart. You have Pluto conjunct the star Crux, a Crux, in the first house of the body, your identity, your appearance. So Pluto represents profound transformation, rebirth, shadow work, and personal power, right? Very scorpionic. And Crux, a Crux, is associated with spiritual depth, intuition, esoteric wisdom, and the ability to navigate darkness without losing connection to the light. And having this conjunction in the first house means that this energy is woven directly into your identity, and also people are feeling this when they meet you. And so you likely have this presence that people feel before they can even put words to it, right? They can't even explain what it is. And then others may naturally open up around you, reveal deeper truths, or find themselves discussing things that they normally don't share with anyone. And it's like an initiatory quality to your energy. And this placement actually often appears in charts of people who become guides through transformation, not because they've avoided hardship, but because they've learned how to transmute it into wisdom. And so when I put these placements together, I see someone who is here to help others expand their perspective liberate themselves from limitation and navigate transformation with greater trust and awareness. So your chart carries the signature of the teacher, but it's not in the traditional sense. You teach through presence. You teach through courage. You teach through your willingness to embody truth. And perhaps the greatest gift of your chart is this. You help people remember that transformation doesn't require becoming someone else. It requires becoming more fully who you are. And that's the frequency of a true guide. And your chart really carries that really beautifully. So I know that was a lot, and I just picked the placements that really jumped out at me. How is this landing? Like, does any of this resonate for you?
No, the whole thing does. I was like, oh, wait, that's me. Hello. Hi.
Good.
And I think I felt a lot of what you were describing before I got into the work it is that I do. I was a girl in high school who everyone told their secrets to and things that they would not reveal to anyone else I knew, like the deepest, darkest. And they felt comfortable with me to ask advice and navigate all those things. And yeah, it tracks.
So glad. Well, I would love to give you a full reading at some point so we can talk about that offline. If you are interested in receiving a galactic astrology reading from me, you can go to heatherrebeccawilson.com/readings and you'll see all of the options that I have available for you. Clarissa, thank you so much for letting me look at your chart. It's a very intimate thing. So thank you for trusting me with this information. I really appreciate it. Cool. Well, so I want to give you an opportunity now to talk about what you're working on, that you're excited about. Yeah, the floor is yours.
Yeah, beautiful. So I am a transformation artist. I guess you can say Alchemical Priestess is my main job, and I help women to kill off their old identity and step into and use that compost to birth their soul selves. And the two main ways that I do that is through either working with me one-on-one in a longer term container that's called Chosen, when becoming her is your birthright. And if you are interested in that, you can book a consultation call with me. And then I host in-person ceremonies, retreats, and I have a retreat that's coming up in November that's called Mujer Bruja, Invoking the Witch Within. I'm doing this with one of my beautiful Bruja friends, Marcela, and we're basically helping women to heal the witch wound through teaching them Afro-Caribbean indigenous folk magic in the mountains of Guatemala. So we're going to be healing the witch wound while we're also teaching magic. And so we're both like, this is like Hogwarts, but if two Latinas taught it.
Love this. When is this happening?
It's happening November 2nd through the 8th.
Crap. That's when my Egypt retreat is.
Of course
Darn it.
Of course it is.
Okay, but that sounds amazing. All right. So you're going to give me all of the links, right? That I can put in the show notes for people if they feel called. I mean, this sounds so magical. Guatemala, hello. I mean, Tikal is there, right? There's so many Mayan ruins in Guatemala.
Yeah. And the whole retreat is run by indigenous women. So it's quite special.
Oh my God. It sounds fantastic. All right. So I have one last question for you. That I ask of all of my podcast guests. What are the new cycles that you are starting, that you are creating in your lineages in this lifetime?
Ooh, I'm starting the cycle of women loving being women in my lineage.
Yeah.
I am starting the new cycle of women having money, so they have choices.
Yes,
Choices and opportunities in my lineage. And I'm starting a cycle where there's actually deep, beautiful relationships amongst mothers and daughters.
Gorgeousness, stunning, beautiful. Sis, I'm so glad that we met. This is just a connection that I'm really excited about. I hope that we can continue to collaborate. I would love for you to teach inside of my membership next year. So we're going to stay in touch. I also want to give you a full galactic reading because I think it's going to blow your mind. So yeah, this has been fabulous. Thank you so much for being in dialogue with me on the show.
This is amazing. Thank you so much for having me.
Girl, no problem. All right, everybody. We will see you next time on the Cycle Starters podcast. Take care. Thanks, Clarissa. Bye, everybody.